Hello, and
Hi, Jessica.
hi, Colleen. So this is my Substack, The Mother of All Things, and I'm here with Colleen Higgs of Modjaji Books. Thanks for coming. And we're
Pleasure.
just discussing the different weather. Your winter, and I'm summer. So, um, maybe you could fill us in a little bit, fill the people that don't know Modjaji as well, how the history of your press, how you got started, when, why, and all of that. Like, why in
Um,
the world did you decide to do this crazy thing? I guess is the real question.
uh, I mean, it's a question I ask myself every day, especially now. I've been doing it for 18 years, and I sometimes wish I could go back to that person 18 years ago and tell her that it's some of what it was going to entail. Um,
Well, the
yeah,
funny thing is, I don't know about you, but like there were definitely plenty of mentors in my life that were telling me what it would entail. And I
yeah,
believed them, but I just hadn't experienced it myself.
yeah,
So,
yeah. No, exactly. I mean, I think it's a bit like when people tell you what it's going to be like to have a child. You don't really get it until you have one. But yeah, so I caught the virus of publishing, um, at various points. But I think the sort of deadly dose, as it were, was when I was working at the Center for the Book, and I ran a project called the Community Publishing Project, and it was about um, coaching groups of writers to publish a book of theirs, either of an individual in the group or of the whole group. And they had to apply for funding. So it started with them, sending in an application and the manuscript if they, anyway, but a proposal. And, then we chose, I think it was 5 a year for 3 years. And they got 10,000 Rand, which was very little, but it wasn't enough, but it was something. And they had to either source the rest of the money themselves or source skills or pay. So,
mhm.
yeah, so I mean, I just really loved the project and fascinating books came out of it. And it also made me see the importance of like books that were for a very small and specific audience. They
Mm.
might have a wider audience, but really they were published for a particular group of people in mind. And then I self-published a collection of my own poetry, and I also wrote a booklet called A Rough Guide to Small Scale and Self-Publishing, because I found myself talking people through a lot of the steps over and over again, and the advice and how to price a book and how to cost it and how to budget and about PR and marketing and etc. So initially it was just like a long Word document, and then it became a booklet, and eventually it was a little book that was published. And I mean, it would be completely out of date now. So many things have changed. The book was first published, the guide was first published in 2004. So it's like
Mhm.
21 years ago, hard to believe. And, so much has changed, including AI, as you were asking me about the tool on Zoom that takes notes. Yeah, I mean, uh, there was no social media at that time. And I think Facebook started in 2007 when Modjaji started, actually.
Well, it was a
Um,
little earlier than that because I know I had it in 2005, but I don't think it had
oh,
opened up to the general public. I was a student, so
okay. Yeah, I think it arrived in South Africa in 2007.
okay.
Um, so it was a very different world in many ways. Um, so I had a job at the Center for the Book in Cape Town, and it was all about um, thinking about publishing and increasing readerships and you know uh, creating readers or encouraging readers, um, giving advice. There was all kinds of things. Um, but I also had a child while I was working there, my one and only, and she was at preschool in my neighborhood. But I knew that when she went to school in South Africa, middle class kids, their schools always expect someone to be able to be on hand to do things. You know, you don't just like it's not just one thing that you can expect and be comfortable with. You know, it's like suddenly school's going to close early on this day, or they're going to have a sports day, and so it's going to start late, or you know, I mean, it was just all kinds of things that just, and you know, the
Yeah,
holidays and
hard
all
to
of that.
have like a 9 to 5 job, so to speak, where your
Yeah,
boss expects you to be there. And
exactly. So, and I mean, it was pretty much me, um, who was, you know, I was the main parent and eventually pretty much the only parent. So, and I mean, had wanted a child, so I wanted to be there for her and to, you know, go to her little swimming galas and, um, you know, all the school things that happen. So, yeah, so that was the one factor. And also, the Center for the Book just became less attractive to me for reasons I won't go into. And yeah, so it just seemed like a fantastic idea to start my own publishing company. Um, and I'd never worked in publishing, so I think that was also why I thought it was a good idea, because I didn't really know any better. Um,
I don't know what
yeah.
that says about me, because I had worked in publishing for quite a few years
I
when
mean,
I
I've
launched
loved it.
mine.
I've loved it, but I'm just saying it's really hard, as you know, and you know, it's hard in so many different ways. I mean, it is also fabulous, you know. There are many wonderful things, but it's also hard, and it's like, I don't know, maybe that's life, you know. I don't know, but
Mm.
I
It's
sometimes feel like
certainly
I'm,
applicable to so many things, marriage,
yeah, yeah.
parenting.
I just
Um,
like sometimes I'd like a quieter life with less interesting things going on, as it were. And many less demands. I mean, I was just thinking, you know, um, I've now published in single book, you know, authors who've brought out, well, sometimes they brought out more than one book, but I'm not talking about anthologies where you've got 20 writers. I'm
right.
talking about an author who's got a book. So, I mean, I've brought out 200 more or less books like that. So it's not that on any given day I'm going to get emails or voice notes or whatever from 200 people, but you know, I get 5 to 10 a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you
Yeah.
know, I think that people might think that I'm tardy and, you know, that I don't respond fast enough or whatever. But, you know, I've just got so much going on. And
It's not like answering email is your full-time thing that you're supposed to do. You're also supposed to be editing books and getting books into production and marketing and like admin and, billing people, invoicing, paying bills, dealing with
yeah,
printers. Yeah,
and I
there's
mean, I
an
sell books.
enormous amount, and those emails do take a lot of time. I
They
know.
do,
I'm
they
with you.
do. And so, you know, and also, I mean, I sell books off the website. And so, you know, I have to like package books myself. I work from home in my little, I've got a sort of a tiny, relatively sub warehouse here. And, you know, package books and wrap them up for the courier and then put the book into my post box, or the pile of books. Then I don't put it in the post box. But anyway, I mean, I've like, you know, several times a week, I've got couriers coming and then couriers delivering books. And today I had a writer from Equatorial Guinea who now lives or is studying in Germany, but she normally lives in Spain, because the book that she, or you know, the books that she writes are um, books that her government doesn't approve of. They are very broadly queer in theme, and I published one, the English translation, which was via Lawrence Schimmel, and the feminist press bought the North American rights, and you know, I got the Southern African rights. So after having, I can't remember when I published it, but she'd never actually seen a copy of the South African edition. So she was very excited. But, then I found myself taking her to town to help her change money. And, anyway, it's like, you land up doing so many things. But I mean, it was wonderful to meet her.
Yeah, you
And
think of all the duties that publishers have. You don't think, oh, ferrying authors around when they happen to come to town to do errands. But in fact, yeah, the
yeah,
check.
I mean, I guess that's what's maybe slightly different for you in El Paso. I mean, Cape Town is like a major destination for people coming to South Africa, and not meaning to be, undermining of El Paso. I'm sure it's lovely, and I look forward to visiting. But I think in terms of being a destination, it's probably not as
You're being so politic. Nobody comes to El Paso. Nobody wants to come to El Paso. It's their they're missing out because it's a really
exactly.
lovely city and it's a lovely desert city and there's the people are interesting in all those things, but you're absolutely right. I never have an author be like, I just happen to be coming to El Paso. Can we,
Yeah,
have lunch
yeah, exactly.
or whatever?
But I
No, it
don't,
never
and I
happens.
also don't just have authors. I have people who, like, I don't
Yeah,
know, there's
illustrators,
like a million reasons people want to meet with me.
graphic
Um,
designers, interior designers, cover designers. I know. Yeah.
yeah, but not even those people. It's, it can be authors that I haven't published yet, and like, oh, I'm going to be in Cape Town, and I'd love to meet you. And I mean, in an ideal world, I'd love to meet you too, so to speak. But you know, like I'm already stretched quite
It's
thin,
hard. Yeah.
as it were. Yeah, so it's
I never really thought about that as one of the major advantages. I mean, actually, I love, that's the part of why we got into publishing were these relationships with writers,
yes,
right? And we
yeah,
love
yeah,
that, and I'm
absolutely,
sure you love
yeah,
it. But at the same time, it does really like an author might think, well, it's just coffee, like with just me. But if you've got authors coming in 2 or 3 times a week that want to do that, or even 2 times a week, even once a week, that's really disruptive to your schedule, your normal work schedule, because it isn't just coffee ever, right? So it is wonderful, but I never thought about that as a major advantage to living in a city that nobody wants to visit. There's a really good reason to stay in El Paso.
exactly. I mean, I'm not saying it isn't, it's just Cape Town really is one of those destination places. So, and I mean, but for people within the country, but also, people visiting the country.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah. It's like New York. Yeah.
terrible work, but someone's got to do it.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about how, for me, I often hear the received wisdom for small independent publishers is that you need to have a really narrow focus, right? You need to create a brand that people recognize you for. And certainly in the last number of years, especially with kind of the dominance of progressive leftist politics in publishing, that tends to be, um, you know, women based or diverse books for kids or LGBTQ plus, branded books, focus or, like kind of leftist concerns that tends to be, maybe socialist or anarchist kind of, like I definitely have seen all sorts of these types of very strongly focused branded uh, you know, progressive sports books or, like that type of thing. That's the received wisdom, like that is what you should do. And in many, many ways, you have done that. You've also told me that you regret it a little bit, that you feel like it's pigeonholed you to some degree. You want to talk about what your focus is and the strengths and weaknesses of, I mean, let's talk about broadly the strengths and weaknesses of a focused approach overall, but then specifically the strengths and weaknesses of your particular focus.
Um, Yeah, so I publish, as you know, Southern African women writers. Um, and it does mean that um, going to fairs, book fairs, it's hard for me to buy books, buy right, or bring import books because those publishers at international fairs aren't
Oh,
publishing
they're
Southern
not
African
publishing
women.
Southern African.
But I mean, because I made up the rule, as it were, or the focus, I mean, I can change it. So I mean, for example, the person I
Except
mentioned.
Modjaji's known for it, right? Like, how do you change
Oh
it at a
yeah.
certain
No,
point?
no, but for example, today the person I mentioned, Melibea um Obono, Trifonia Melibea Obono from Equatorial Guinea. Um, I just thought, she's not from Southern Africa, but it's a really interesting novella, really. It's a short novel. And it's the only African country that was Spanish. I can't think of the word, but anyway,
Spanish speaking, yeah,
like
or
colonial.
colonized by Spain, yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And I just thought, well, and Lawrence Schimmel that I mentioned, I think, he pitched the book to me, and I somehow just got excited about it. And so it didn't quite fit, but it also sort of fit,
Yeah.
in a way. So I mean, I think that so long as it has something that speaks to at least part of what are the books Modjaji publishes. So it's Southern African women writers, but also I like the books to have a feeling of Southern Africa. So, if it's a South African or a Southern African person who's lived in, El Paso their whole life, or, since they were a teenager or whatever, I mean, maybe I'd look at it, but it's like I'm more interested in the the
The
place as
ethos
well,
of
and
things.
the kinds of experiences that people who live here have, and how that's different to other places, or how it's specific to them. um, and then I wanted to publish women writers because, or the writings of women, because I mean, some people don't start out as writers, but they have stories or things they want to say, and they sort of become writers, whereas other people are sort of writers. If you know what I mean. um, yeah, so sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
Well, so you've explained the focus, and now you're going to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of a focused approach broadly,
Yeah,
but also specifically
I
what are the
think
strengths and
yeah.
weaknesses for you focusing on Southern African women writers?
I mean, I think having a focus is good because it just helps you to choose. There's so many potential books you could publish. So, I mean, if you immediately exclude a bunch, there's fewer that you're having to consider. Um, and I do think that the focus that I had was important. And especially in the early years of Modjaji, I really wanted to try and publish Black South African women writers. Um, because it felt as though there was a need for that there weren't enough um, Black women writers being published. And I mean, I'm happy to say that that has changed, since I first started 18 years ago. And, now it's pretty easy if people's manuscripts are good and, they've got a strong voice and whatever, they're likely to get published by the bigger publishers. So in some ways, my work here is done. But you know not obviously not entirely, but um I mean, the weakness, I suppose, is more that one wouldn't get to see some books that maybe would be important, or you could really do a good job publishing, but the point is one can't do everything. So
No,
I
one
think
can't do everything. It feels to me like one of the weaknesses, of course, is that you also then very much narrow your potential readership. Um, you know, uh, I guess it really depends. Like if you're marketing your press as we're a press that publishes Southern African women writers, right? Then you're likely marketing the books more narrowly too, and not in this kind of broad way where, well, this just happens, and this just happens to be a thriller, right? And
Right,
it's a
right.
thriller that should appeal to a Norwegian man living in Oslo, and it should appeal to a teenager growing up in Melbourne, Australia, and that American housewife who devours books in the suburbs of New Jersey should love it too. Like the marketing of it as, you know, Modjaji Books is a, uh,
Yeah, yeah.
so that
I mean,
Southern African women writers, like that man in Oslo, Norway, might be like, that's not a book for me, right? That's not a press for me. Now, I mean, that doesn't mean that man in Oslo, Norway might not actually be like, well, actually, I'm really, really interested in that. Maybe I'll, check that out. But it does kind of, I think, limit the audience. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's, but like I think about, LGBTQ plus themed presses, there's a broad readership that might love a book, but they'll think that book's not for me because of the way it's branded. And that's, I think, a danger when we, you know, there's that long-standing way of thinking about books as both mirrors and windows, right? They're a mirror
mhm.
to some people and they're a window to other people. And just and that's one way my cat is. If you're seeing this tail waving around, my cat decided to come up onto my lap. Um and but some people aren't really all that interested in a window. But that doesn't mean they wouldn't be interested in the book. But when you're
Yeah.
really, really theming your whole press around something so specific, then you're probably kind of marketing things in that sort of very specific way. And I think it can really lessen the, you know, way of the audience, the potential audience. And I think that
Well,
that is a
I mean,
potential
I guess
downside.
I don't really think about that the audience in Melbourne and Oslo and New Jersey. Although
I
the
do.
yeah, the books have reached all kinds of places. There's a book that I published that was a set work in a university in Oregon. Um, so the books go places that you don't even imagine when you first publish the book. Um, and once again, I mean, my press is really small, and it's just, I mean, I'm the only sort of constant worker. I have interns who come and go, and often they're very talented and do lovely things, but they're here for a short season. And I haven't been able to expand. Maybe if I'd had bigger dreams, I would have. But I think in some cases, I've also been able to survive really just because I've kept it small and haven't had to find salaries for a whole lot of people, and just kept it small and kept it going. I don't know, I'm not really a business person. I had to become one to some extent. Um, but yeah, the books have reached much further than I ever imagined.
Mhm.
So even, I mean, I guess I don't market each book as a Modjaji book. It just is a Modjaji book. But but when there are people who are looking for books from African women or from South Africa or dealing with this topic, then they might find that one of the books that have come out of Modjaji would fits that category.
Mhm.
um, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if that's something authors really need to think about too. Like if that, I mean, does that specific branding help find an audience or does it lose an audience? And I don't know. I think that people tend to think it helps find an audience. And I'm not,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm not sure either. I mean, I think that uh, a big part of what I've done has been to publish debut authors because,
mm,
the authors that I do really well with then go on to bigger things because, they can get paid more and have wider reach. So I think that when you're publishing mostly debut authors, I mean, it's not the only kind of author I've published, but, I think they're less fussy, especially in South Africa, where the options aren't as many as maybe for US writers. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know either. Um, well, moving on to another thing, I wonder if you could just say maybe three things that you tell writers, or, three things that are advice you give to writers, or that you wish you could tell writers, if you had the opportunity more often.
Um, well, so I mean, let me just think. I have a welcome to Modjaji Books letter in which I sort of outline the process, but it doesn't really seem to. It's a bit like what we were saying, like if you have a child, even if someone gave you a welcome to parenthood letter, and there was someone you could ask questions of, you'd probably still ask rather than go back and look at the letter.
Right.
um, yeah, I mean, I think that I think for writers, managing their expectations is something that, I mean, I don't really know how they should do it, because the point is you don't want to, how can I say, that people should have dreams and should be willing to put in the work and imagine their book will be a bestseller, but they also need to know that it might not be, that maybe they'll only sell 300 or 500 or 1,000 copies. And in South Africa, if you sell 1,000 copies, that's great. Um,
I
uh,
sometimes feel like that's pretty great in the US too. I I mean, I've mentioned this statistic elsewhere, but I was reading the story of the book, which is this book on the history of publishing, and apparently, like, fewer than 8% of books sell more than 100 copies.
wow. So quite a lot of my books are above in that
Top 8%.
8%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So, but it's that managing expectations of, hoping for the best, but being prepared to deal with the worst. I mean, I think writers do feel very dashed when their books don't sell in great numbers. And, in South Africa, the reviewing scene is very limited, especially if you're an independent publisher with limited means. I don't know. I mean, there are places that always review, but it's hard to get reviews and to get media attention on books. Um, so all of the things that people maybe think might happen for them may not.
Yeah.
And I mean, in South Africa, the book tour isn't a thing in the way that it is in the States, although I do
It needs
understand
to be a thing in the US too.
it isn't. Or
I think it
authors,
ceased to be. Yeah, no, I mean, most publishing companies can't afford it. I always
yeah,
tell my authors that, for the most part, I think unless they can sell at least 20 to 30 books at a
event.
place, then I'm actually probably going to lose money as a publisher, because, bookstores want they want, they call it co-op money, which is automatic. Like, they request it from my distributor and they get it. And that's like anywhere from $100 to $200. Well, $100 and $200, they have to sell quite a few books to just recoup that money,
Mm,
just to break even for me as a publisher. And I still have to pay
right.
royalties to the authors on those books. You know, I've had, like,
No,
so
I know, I do.
so
Yeah,
I, like, I try and, maybe there's a launch in their hometown because they can
yeah.
people out, but you know, even if they want to fund some like road trip where they do a book tour, it's probably not worth it for the sales because they're probably not gonna, I mean, even
Yeah.
at 20, 25 copies sold, they might not even break even for that co-op.
No, exactly.
So
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think that um I mean, writing a book, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and the chances of you sort of in getting money back that is equal to the effort and time and energy and everything that you put in is unlikely. But it's still worthwhile doing if that is your dream, because you learn so much about yourself and about the topic that you're writing about, and about, you develop skills. So it's great. It's like, um, one or two of my writers have made jokes that it's like a very expensive business card. Um, like once you've got that book and you can talk about it and talk about other things and sort of be fabulous, it's you know, the world's your oyster in many ways. But you also have to know how to, to go out there and do it. I mean, many writers are introverts. Not all, but I mean, many writers are introverts. So it can be quite hard to switch from being an introvert to being this person who's got to like sing for their supper or be a performer. Um, yeah, I mean, for example, one of the things, this is not answering your question, but one of the things that I really don't enjoy is at launches when they're in Cape Town, and if I go along, having to introduce the authors, and I don't mind doing the conversation, but that thing of being like the MC, I don't know, I don't enjoy it. It sort of makes me feel very anxious. um, yeah, I don't know what else I would tell authors. I mean, I would tell them to just be proud of themselves for having written the book and publishing, having published it, having had it published, and that they won't know straight away what it will mean in their lives.
mm,
Um, you know,
mm.
uh, like in
In
Cape
fact,
Town.
might probably has trailing effects for the rest of their life.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, in Cape Town, my friend and I often make not a joke, but like we'll say, you never regret a swim, even if it's the middle of winter. So that's a small investment, even swimming in very cold water. But, you'll never regret having written a book. You might realize that the time and effort didn't equate to your bank balance, or, to a positive effect on your bank balance. But, you know, it, it'll still be a good thing to have done. And you
Yeah.
won't know straight away is what I'm saying as well. Um, I mean, I also found it interesting how writers, as independent publishers, we're putting our money into a book, and excluding our own personal costs for us doing work. Just producing a book in South Africa
So
um,
expensive.
costs like 40 or 50 or 60,000 rand. And, I sometimes wonder if authors really get that,
Yeah, that's like $4,000,
yeah, I'm putting in
or like
this amount,
5,000.
yeah, of my money, like,
Yeah.
um, do you understand that? And even if they make a contribution or buy books up front, it's still, um, yeah. So anyway,
Yeah,
I
no,
don't
I think
know.
that traditionally published authors tend not to think about that. I think hybrid authors do because they're investing, they're subsidizing the publication. They're not the only person probably putting money into it, and of course, lots of time and investment of,
Yes,
but nevertheless, I think hybrid published authors do understand that a bit better because they are investing their money. But
yes,
I think a lot of traditionally published authors don't realize that, particularly when it's somebody so small like both of our companies, that it is us, it's you, it's me. I am spending my money to publish your book that I'm likely not going to break even on. And and so yeah, when it's like a big corporate publisher, that is a really that's a faceless entity. Like you don't who is investing that money? It's a corporation, you know, and they're recouping so much money from so many books. It's, you know, just a really different process. But a small
Yeah.
independent publisher is in fact, it's not faceless.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, no, I agree. I think authors often don't think about that end of things unless they are self-publishing or hybrid publishing, and then they're much more aware of the costs
Yes.
involved
Yeah.
in publishing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say $4,000 to $5,000 is pretty good for a book. It can be a lot more.
I mean, I think that in South Africa, it's probably a bit cheaper to publish because we don't have some of the expenses that you have demanded of you at the distributor level. And um, yeah, the sort of sending out 200 copies for reviews, etc. You know, that doesn't, uh, you know, that would be unheard of here. I
Right.
mean, I think, you know, in my experience, maybe not for the, but I still think 200 would be a hang of a lot, you know, in South Africa
Yeah,
to send
yeah,
out for free, just to sort of generate readership.
yeah.
Maybe it would change everything. Who knows?
Well, the part of the problem is you send them out and you know your return on it, maybe if you're lucky, is 5 reviews. So yeah, it's
Mm,
something that, you know, we definitely have been rethinking a little bit here where we're sending out a lot more digital review copies, not as many paper copies. We're letting people know about it, and if they request it, then we send it. There are still some places that we automatically send print copies to,
yeah, yeah.
but a lot of places where
Yeah, I mean, I used to also just send out books, but now I ask if somebody wants a
yeah,
book. I don't just send it. Also,
yeah.
our postal service in South Africa doesn't really work. So, you know, every book you send, you have to courier. So,
Publishing challenges.
yeah, so it makes it, you know,
Much more
probably
expensive.
four times as much as it used to be with the postal service.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else, last thing you would like to say? Or shall we?
Yeah, that's, I mean, I just want to say that I'm excited to have partnered with you as,
I'm
you know,
very excited to be
to,
bringing out Modjaji's books
yeah,
and
to get our books out and to the
yeah,
wider world via Catalyst. So,
yep, I'm very excited about that as well. So
yeah.
thank you. All right. Well, thank you to everybody who listens to this. And this is Colleen Higgs of Modjaji Books. Colleen, what's your website? It's mojajibooks.com.
.co.za.
See, oh, right. I'll put it in the you know, the show description.
Yeah. Okay.
All
Thank you,
right. Thanks so
Jessica.
much.
Bye.